Everybody, welcome back to the How to Podcast series. I love when I meet people who help podcasters. That's what the whole show is about. We want to help you as a podcaster to be successful, give you tools, give you resources, give you somebody in your corner who can help you be a better podcaster, show up in this space, be successful. And what I love about having Brandy on the show today and what she does over at Kitcaster, it's a great name. I love it. I've been practicing. Kitcaster.com. They help podcasters. And Brandy's here to share more about what they do for podcasters, but as well to have a conversation around podcasting to encourage you as you are on your journey as a podcaster. So Brandy, welcome. It's my guest co-host. Glad to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, Dave. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Excellent. Tell everybody where you are, Brandy, in this big world of ours.
Yes, so I am in Denver, Colorado.
A beautiful place to live.
Beautiful place to live. Yes. If you enjoy the outdoors and outdoor adventures, Colorado is the place for you. So it's actually a little bit overwhelming when I moved here. There's just so much to attach yourself to, hiking, snowshoeing, climbing. You really have to be strategic about what you decide to dive into.
Sounds like a gorgeous place. I've talked to people from your part of the world, and everyone goes there, moves there, and stays. They don't leave. They love it. So it's excellent. Great. Awesome. So we're connecting around something that you do with your team. Can you give us a little introduction to what Kitcaster is and what you guys do over at kitcaster.com?
You bet. Yeah. So really at our core, Dave, is we celebrate great conversation through podcasting. We really act as a conduit between podcasts and folks who have an expertise, a desire to want to speak to a certain audience. So we really hone in on our client's voice, figure out what their messaging is, what are their best target audiences so that they can have a great conversation. I mean, that's really what podcasting is all about, right? Is building, and I love this about how you perceive podcasting, Dave, and just building a community around that. And I truly believe that. And a lot of our clients are business professionals, a lot of them in the innovation space. And they're building their communities from the ground up and using podcasts and podcast appearances as a way to further increase that.
Excellent. How long has Kitcaster been around?
So we have been around officially for October 2024. So we came into existence. We decided it was like an October day. We were like, you know what? We're starting our company. We had two clients. So we just put our flag in the ground. We're like, this is the day. Kitcaster is born. And we had a little launch party. We were like, nothing. We actually didn't even really know what we were going to be yet. We had people come and they were like, tell us about this Kitcaster thing. And we're like, well, we have this idea. We don't actually know if it's going to work, but we think it will. So we're glad you're here and welcome to our journey.
And now it takes a village to do what you do. So tell me a little bit about your team. Let's give them a shout out.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a fabulous team. We dedicate each of our clients to a campaign manager. So the campaign managers is really working intimately in the podcast space and really understanding what the client wants, right? Like what kind of conversations they want to have. And then they're working and building relationships with podcast hosts it's really kind of beautiful because as you know, Dave, podcast hosts are also looking for amazing guests to feature on their shows. So the campaign managers get to kind of work both sides, right? They're working with the client to identify what conversations they want to have. They're also working with the podcast hosts and producers to understand what types of guests that they want to feature and have conversations with. So, and it's interesting. And I don't know if you've had folks on your show before, but we really like to tell our clients, yes, you're representing a brand, but you are a person, and we need to share your personal journey and how you came to do what you do and why what you do is so important and doing that through storytelling because we all connect through stories.
Yeah, that is a huge thing as a podcaster. Being able to tell a good story, understanding the elements of a good story that brings people into the conversation is one thing to rattle off a bunch of stats and a bunch of facts, but as a listener, you're like, what am I going to do with this? But a story helps us remember, and a story helps us to connect because we see ourselves in the story as we hear the story. So I love that about that. So as a podcaster, talk a little bit about our connection with Kitcaster. Like, how do we raise our hands as a podcaster and say, hey, I'd like to be a part of what you're doing? Is there like an onboarding type of introduction that happens between Kitcaster and podcasters?
Yeah. So if there's a podcaster out there that's like, you know what, I want to have more conversations with these particular types of guests, go to our website, and then we'll just keep you on our radar when we have a client that would fit for that type of conversation. We may have somebody already on our roster. Maybe there's somebody that we've worked with previously, but our goal is to facilitate conversations on both sides, right? So not only our clients, but also podcasters that are wanting to have great guests on. So it's really simple for folks to just go to our website. It's kitcaster.com, and you can reach out to us and let us know what you're looking for, and we can help find the right guests for you.
Okay, let's jump into why you feel at Kitcaster and all your amazing things you do, why podcasting is such a powerful tool for sharing and building connections. Why podcasting compared to being on social media or having a website or a blog? Why specifically podcasting, and why is this such a great tool for us?
Yeah, well, I'm going to back this up to my college days. I was an art history major, and I was taking an art history course with a professor that everyone had warned me was difficult. And it was a genre that I wasn't particularly interested in, but I had to take it. It was mandatory. So I took the course. It was American West art. I got my paper back, and it was covered in red ink. And I received an F on the paper, and that was the first F I've ever received. And in fact, I actually considered myself to be a pretty good writer up until that point. Like, it shook me to my core. I was angry. I sat on it. I scheduled office hour times with the professor. So by the time that I met with her, it had been a couple of days, so I had cooled off a little bit. And I went in and I put my paper down, and I was like, this is shocking to me. Like, I actually thought I did a really good job, and I've never received a grade like this before. And she was just like, she put me back on my heels. I was ready for a fight, and she was like, we're not fighting. You're a terrible writer. So I was like, well, I was a senior in college. I had gotten through 4 years. I had received A's on almost everything that I had written previously. So as you can imagine, this was a shock to my system. So I immediately was like, well, what am I supposed to do? I have to finish this course. I can't drop this course, and I need to course correct my writing. And she was like, well, you should start writing every day. You should start reading and really reading, analyzing how sentences are put together. And she was like, and you need to listen to talk radio. So everywhere that I would go, I would be listening to talk radio. And it actually was the best advice that I'd ever received. Because at the time, I mean, we're talking the late 90s, I was listening to NPR. And I was listening to all the various programming that they had. I got obsessed with This American Life. I can't even remember what year that came out, but I feel like that was early 2000s. And just the journalistic integrity, the way that they would put language together, it definitely helped me. And then I became obsessed with audio storytelling. And then with the rise of podcasting, and with Serial, I think Serial was one of the podcasts that really caught fire and got everyone's attention. Hey, listen, audio's here, it's not going anywhere, and it's creating an obsession. So that is really those kind of steps is what got me to embracing podcasting, and really just the authentic nature. I love getting lost in the stories, and it feels like I know the two people that are talking. And Dave, I had listened to a few of your podcasts before coming onto your show today. So when I met you, when we met before we pushed record, I felt like I already knew who you were. I think it's
Wow.
just such a beautiful medium. It's just a way of connecting that I just don't think any other medium allows us to.
I love that. And I also love when podcasters turn their podcast into community, where I have three things that I try to get podcasters to do. Somehow get your listener to self-identify, put their hand up and say, I listen to your show, Brandy. I love your podcast. That's the first thing. The second thing is to have some sort of feedback loop where now you can talk to that listener one-on-one through email, voice messages, something where you can have a conversation with that person. But then the third part that a lot of podcasters neglect, I find, is they don't have a way for their listeners to talk to each other.
Yeah.
To build community so they can talk to each other and say, hey, I listened to Brandy's show. I listened to Brandy's show. We're now best friends because, hey, we have something in common. We have Brandy's podcast, for example, and that's our thing. So one thing I've been doing in the last year is I host on meetup.com, and I have a podcaster meetup twice a week, every Tuesday. After this, when we're done recording, I'm going to that next. Every Tuesday and every Saturday, we get together with listeners of this podcast. We just share podcasting with each other. We're all different podcasters. We're all on different journeys, but we have a chance to talk about what they hear on the show, but also then have time with me, time with each other, and it's all community based. So not only is it just passive listening to a show, you're actively involved with the host on a regular basis and you have time with that person. I love having time with a podcaster. You're right. You build this relationship over time where you feel like you know them. Like you could pick them out in a crowd. You know the story about the time when this thing happened and this happened. And you're just like for me, I love Mel Robbins.
Yes.
The Mel Robbins podcast for me, she is amazing at bringing her audience into the conversation.
Really.
And I just love, I press play on anything she does. I bought her books, I do everything because I feel like I know her, never met her. I would love to, but I've never met her. But I feel like I could tell you 1,000 things about Mel Robbins just by being one of her community members and being part of that. And that's that bond. I don't see that bond in social media with hearts and likes and scrolling with your thumb. I don't see that same level of connection. And I think that's something that we need to lean into as podcasters.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, I think especially given the world and where we're at and this feeling that we're all so separate and we're divided, everyone's come around the table because they listen to your podcast, right? Like that they have that that shared commonality. And when you conversate with somebody, I don't care how different their beliefs are, guaranteed you will find a place that is common amongst the two of you. There's something there, and that is the start to just breaking down barriers. And that's podcasting. That's the most beautiful thing.
Right. And when I hear from somebody that says, hey, Dave, Brandy, I go to podcasting as a listener and I don't find the show that I want, and I feel like there's a gap, then that might be your gap to fill.
Yeah.
You might be the one to be the person and be the voice and build the community around the thing you're not seeing. So if you're in a world where everything seems to be so divided, maybe you're the one to bring it together. Maybe that's your calling through your podcast. And the one thing beautiful about podcasting is even if there is 100 podcasts that talk about what you want to talk about, you're the only you. Mm-hmm. No one else can do the show that you can do because no one is the combined mix of everything you've had in your life. Every story, every lesson, every college degree, every interaction you've had with people, that makes you you. Mm-hmm. So your path is completely different than mine, and I can't do your show. So you're the only one who can. So be encouraged to know that you're the one that can do your show and do it the best. So that's kind of what I'm hoping for this show as well, to encourage that creativity and go, you know what? Even though it's a crowded space, to some degree, there's room for me to be a podcaster.
Yeah, I totally agree. And how many people does it take to make a real community? Not very many, right? Not very many. I think that people oftentimes go into podcasting thinking that they need to have some sort of like it has to be this grand plan, and the metrics of success is having like 10,000 downloads a month.
Right. Yeah. And then building that relationship and realizing that in any good relationship, frequency is an important part. Or you want to hang out with your best friend and have coffee at the coffee shop, and you do that every week, your friend's going to build their life around that relationship, and they're going to be sitting there waiting for you at the coffee shop. And if you just don't show up for a few weeks, and don't tell them, they're going to be like, what happened to Brandy? Where'd she go? Like, I'm waiting. I got my coffee, I bought her coffee. Where'd she go? And in podcasting, we have that relationship we build over time. So whatever your frequency is, to be that on a regular basis, because people will build you into their world because they really love and respect what you do. So just keep that in mind when you sign up as a podcaster, whether it's once a month or once a day, people will build their world around you. So be ready for that. They really do love you. So, that's a big responsibility as a podcaster.
It really is. So Dave, you have 8 podcasts. Is that right? 8 active
I have a problem. Brandy.
What's your frequency? Are they all different, or do you try to keep them all the same publishing schedules?
2 of my 8 shows publish 3 times a week. So that's 6 episodes a week for those 2 podcasts. Some of my shows are weekly. I have one show that's seasonal. It's a children's podcast, and it's from December 1st to December 25th. It's available all year round, but it's a countdown to Christmas for children. So it's all Christmas stories and elves and all kinds of stuff. There's many voices on the show, and it's really fun. And it's just me having fun, being creative and being weird. My wife loves the show. She's characters that she listens to, which are just me, but it's an elf version of me, and she is totally in love with the elf. Kind of tolerates me, but loves the elf. So there's stuff like that. There's so many different things I'm curious about in podcasting and communication. I have a podcast for dads. It's all helping men with mental health and loving your family and showing up better in the world. And there's a quote that I love, Brandy, that kind of leads and guides me in everything that I do. I came across this a while ago. It's not my quote, but it basically says that you can count the number of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the number of apples in a seed. And what I love about this quote is that we look at our stats, we look at our numbers and go, well, I only have 1, 2, 10 listens. Maybe I'm not a successful podcaster. Maybe I should stop podcasting. But what if, Brandy, what if that one person who listens to your show now goes home and treats their family better? What if that one person now chooses a better path in life, and they were on a bad path and now they're on a good path, and their life is different because of your show and because that you put something out in the world? That's the untapped, uncountable potential in that one seed. You can't give me a number how many apples that one seed represents. So that one listener, even though that might seem like a failure, is actually a huge success with unlimited potential. You could change somebody's life just by being here and sharing your thoughts and sharing your story. And that's why I love what you are so focused on story, because I think people then can insert themselves into your story and frame it to help themselves. So I think that's really important.
I totally agree. I think that, one thing that we do work with all of our clients on in the beginning of every campaign is storytelling. And it's interesting, Dave, because I think there's a lot of people out there that don't believe they have a story or their story isn't interesting. And I can tell you that everyone's story is interesting. Sometimes you just have to dig a little bit deeper to find that piece, right? That piece that's like uniquely yours, and then figuring out a way to make it attach to other people, right? So the way that you deliver it, the way that you tell a story, because it's really just shared human experience. And we always attach ourselves to something in a conversation and a story that we can relate to. Maybe it's a feeling that we had that we couldn't even identify or put words to it. And all of a sudden somebody on a podcast is saying something and you're like, for 18 years, I've been wondering what that is. And now I get it. I mean, those are the moments that I think are so unique, and especially to podcasting. I mean, sometimes I think you can get that in like little, TikTok video reels, but they're like so fleeting, and it feels just like they're taking just like one moment in time. And there's just something incredibly rich about that long form conversation and really developing out that human emotion piece and really attaching people to the story you can't really replace it. And you're right. Like if you can make a difference in one person's life, and you may not even know it. a lot of times you're not going to hear, right? Nobody's going to email you and say, wow, Dave, that conversation that you had that like really changed the course of my life. Sometimes they will, but a lot of times people won't. So it's
Right.
really hard to
Yeah.
kind of measure your
Yeah.
impact.
Yeah. Right. And I kind of look at social media to some degree, kind of like a drive-through situation at a restaurant where you pull up to the window, grab a snack, and off you go. And you're driving and eating. Probably not a good idea, but you're driving and eating, and you're just busy, busy, busy. You're just it's food, but it's not an experience compared to podcasting, which is more like sitting down at a nice table with your family, having conversation. No one's in a hurry. We're just doing food together. It's a family experience. And those are where memories are made. Memories aren't made in the drive-through line. That's content and it's available and it's accessible and it's quick and easy, but it doesn't give you the best long-term feeling compared to a nice sit-down dinner where no one's in a hurry. And that's where I kind of see as podcasting more as a sit-down event where social media can be more of a scroll quick hit. And
Yeah.
I like the long-term kind of more relaxed feeling.
Yeah, I like that analogy a lot. It's very accurate. And I know that launching a podcast can sometimes be scary and it is somewhat of a heavy lift, right? Especially if you want to stay consistent. So I would always encourage anyone. I mean, I think anyone can be a guest on a podcast. You just have to find the right podcast to guest on. So I would always encourage folks who are interested in podcasting, interested in sharing their voice, thinking about starting a podcast, reach out to some hosts and just see if you can start by being a guest.
Great.
Sure,
That's
sure.
great.
Or that way.
Yeah. It's that's really good advice. I like that. From your perspective, as you work with people who want to be on podcasts as guests, and you work with podcasters who are looking for guests, do you have any tips to a podcaster on how to be a better host to their guest? We talk a lot to the guests all the time, but we don't talk to the host very often. Is there anything that you would suggest to a podcaster that if you send somebody from Kitcaster to them, here's my basic assumptions, here's my basic hopes that you're going to be a great host to this guest I'm sending to you? Is there any hopes or any kind of guidelines you'd give to a podcaster on how to be a better host to a guest?
Yeah, I think every podcaster has their own way of navigating a conversation. Some I've heard from a lot that don't really like to prepare because they want it to seem authentic. They want the conversation to flow. From what I hear from our clients and the conversations that they enjoy the most are hosts that do a little bit of research before so that they can guide the conversation in a way that is meaningful. And I'm not saying in a way that promotes somebody's brand, but just in a way that you have to build a little bit before bringing them onto your show. I really do believe that. I think coming in completely cold and not doing any sort of background and doing any sort of like, who is this person and what are they involved in? And just, I'm not saying you have to do like a deep investigative dive, but just having a general understanding, I think is really important. And you would be surprised that there's just a lot. And I appreciate people wanting to learn for the first time and kind of explore that way. But I've heard from a lot of our clients that they much prefer the conversations where a host is prepared, is ready to kind of navigate them down the path that really taps into what they can talk about, because really you want to get the most out of this guest too, right? So just taking them down a route that will get the most for your listeners and for them, I think is really important.
Let's jump back to storytelling again. One thing that I would love to chat about with you from your perspective is how to discover the hook in the story and how do you bring this to life. It's going to be helpful for guests who listen to the show because they want to tell good stories as a guest on a podcast. But as a host as well, we want to tell great stories that connect with our audience. So how do we discover the hook, like the main thing about this story? And then how do we add life to it? I'm really interested to get your thoughts.
couple different ways that stories develop, usually in a podcast conversation. A personal story, right? People oftentimes want to know, like, your background, what got you interested in this field, much like you kind of queued that up for me. They also want to know, what's your professional story? Like, why is what you do important? Why is it different? Why should we care to listen to this, right? So kind of taking those two, personal and professional, and breaking those down. And I like to attach single words to both of them. Like, what are the three most important things to you on a personal level? What are the three most important things to you on a professional level? Let's back into that. So if you can only choose 3 words for each one of those categories, and then we're going to then uncover the stories that align with each of those words. So like, let's say on a personal level, you are all about community. That is like one of your keywords, right? So like, let's find a story and how important that was to you and how that kind of shaped your character. So those are the places, because that's oftentimes where people, it's hard to even know where to start. How do I start to develop these stories that are going to matter to the audiences? And I think a lot of times people want to look at their kind of professional lives, but miss the personal piece. But it's really important to have both of them. So I start with 3 words, and then we find stories that align with both of those. And that's usually the hook, because that's something that you're passionate about, and that comes through. And I can always tell when somebody's like talking about something that maybe is like a talking point that their communications department queued up for them versus something that they truly believe in their soul. Their face lights up. Everything changes. Their whole demeanor changes. Like, I know exactly when I've hit the spot that they actually want to talk about, because I can see it in their face. That's really what I do when I'm working with clients and trying to just peel back kind of the onion layers of the stories that really matter to what they're doing.
Excellent. I love the idea of 3 words, 3 stories. I think one thing when I talk to podcast guests, when they come on my author podcast or my other shows that I do, sometimes the guests don't know their story. They don't know what they're here to do. They don't know what they're saying, or they don't have anything kind of pre-planned to kind of know where to go in the conversation. And in that, they get lost a little bit, where they feel like they don't know if this was a great, and at the end we're done. And I'm like, thanks, that was great. They're like, did I do okay? Like, did I do a good job? Like, I don't know how I did. Especially if you're new, you're still got to learn how to do all this, right? It's not normal to get on and talk about yourself. For some people, it's very hard to do this. So understanding that 3 words, 3 stories, that's a great framework. I love that.
It is. It's a good starting framework. And I also always tell people to add details, add details to your characters. What kind of temperament did the person have? Like, how did they make you feel? Because those are the pieces that people are going to really connect with. You're talking about a boss that intimidated you. Like, you couldn't sleep at night. You were so nervous to go to work the next day. You got the Sunday scaries. Like, as human beings, we've all had a moment in our life that we have felt that way. And that's when you make true connection with people. When you're able to have them see themselves in your story, then you've got them hooked. Then they care. They want to continue to listen to you.
The other thing I love what you're doing right now in real time, Brandy, is this isn't a gigantic commercial for Kitcaster, which we love. You're talking stories, you're helping people, you're focused on things that are going to help the audience. Another good component as a guest to consider is when you come on a show, do your homework. You said you listened to a couple episodes. Thank you.
Yep.
But to do your homework, get the tone of the show. Like, how does the host do the show? Is it loud and boisterous, or is it quiet and reflective? Like, know the tone, because then you can kind of adjust and don't come in too hot or too cold. You know exactly how to fit into the tone of the podcast. That's really good. But don't just come on and sell. This is not an infomercial. This is a chance to give great value, like you're doing today, Brandy, with the audience. And then that makes me want to work with you even more, because you're not here just commercial, sell. You're giving value. So as a guest, when you go on a podcast, come with value. the host is going to give you opportunities to promote. We want you to do well. That's the whole goal for this. But at the same time, there has to be a benefit to the listener, because if they just feel like they're being sold to the whole time, they're going to tune out. But when you're coming like you are, Brandy, giving value and just serving the audience, that's a connection that's going to lead to more great things for you down the road from the listeners.
Yeah, Dave, that's great advice. That is something that we talk about all the time. And it's hard sometimes for people to step outside of that selling mindset. But we've talked about this a lot in this conversation, but how many podcasts are out there? And I have done this where I've started to listen to an episode, and in the first 10 minutes, I'm not attached to the conversation at all. I'm going to abandon that very quickly, and I'm going to move on to the next one because I can.
Yeah, I've also had people on the show as a guest, and I'm like, so tell me about storytelling. And they're like, well, you have to buy my book. Okay, well, that's hard. Okay, I'm going to try another question. So what are the elements of a good story? Well, that's in chapter 4. I'm not going to talk about that. Buy the book. I'm like, why are you here?
Yeah.
If you don't want to, like, if it's just buy the book is the answer for everything I ask you, it's going to be a very short conversation. So I'm encouraging guests as well to show up with a servant's heart, speak to the audience, build connection, leverage the opportunity of being on a podcast, because it's a great way for you to have evergreen content in the world. People can listen to this years from now and still come to you. So make sure you show up for that audience as well. That's really important. I love that.
Yeah. And I really believe that human beings, we're craving like real, authentic conversation, connection. I think we live in a world where we've referenced social channels quite a bit, but I feel like those, if you're looking at a scale of authenticity, I feel like that's at like a 1 or 2. And podcasting is probably more towards the 8 to 10, especially if people show up and they're willing to be vulnerable, willing to talk about things that, maybe they've failed in their life and they've been able to pick themselves back up. Like that's a part of the human experience. And I think as more technology continues to advance and AI generative content, like we are going to crave real conversation, real authentic connections. So it is just ripe for podcasting and what you're doing, Dave. I mean, like doing the thing that you love doing and all the different podcasts that you're bringing to the world because you are truly passionate about it and building community. I think that's just wildly important.
Thank you for making time, Brandy, to be here. Take us again. I'm a first-time visitor. I'm going to kitcaster.com. I've never been here before. Do you have a starting point, like where I should go as a brand new community member of Kitcaster? Where do I go?
Yeah, you can dig through our website. But if you go to our resources page, there is a wealth of information for you there. Anything that you want to know about podcasting, being a guest, there's just so much content, free content for you to consume. And, if you feel compelled to have a conversation, you're interested in guesting on some podcasts, contact us. There's a very easy contact submission form on the website, and we can just have a quick conversation and just see what you're aiming to do. It's super low pressure. And I love just to connect with anyone that's interested in podcasting because it's just such a beautiful space. Obviously, I'm very passionate about it. And any questions that you might have, I'm always willing to give up any time to talk about podcasting.
Excellent. And your team is awesome. A great communication through the whole process of getting you on the show. So I know from my side of the mic, I know that you guys do a great job. So thank you so much, Brandy, for doing this. And
yeah.
We'd love to have you come on in the future and give us updates on how Kitcaster continues to grow and any new features that come out in the future. I'd love to have you come back. So keep me in mind.
Yeah.
Okay. And we'll keep promoting and chatting about you and all the great stuff you're doing at Kitcaster.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dave. I really, really enjoyed this conversation.
Excellent. As always, everyone, you know how we do things. In the show notes will be links to everything that Brandy's mentioned. Go there to the website. Make sure you let her know that you heard about her here on the podcast. I'm sure she'd love to get some feedback. And you're curious about what they do, spend some time. Get in the calendar and talk to that great team. I'm sure they'd love to speak with you and help guide and direct you on your journey as a podcaster. Brandy, thank you so much for doing this. Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast all the way through to the end. I love having these great guest co-hosts on the show to share their podcast with you. You have some homework to do. And what I'm asking of you is to go check out our featured guest co-host today. Go over and listen to their podcast. The links are always in the show notes. And I'd love for you to go and give them your love and support. And I think if we can all do that for each other, podcasting will be a lot more fun for all of us. So it's time to do what you've asked others to do for you. It's time to do for this guest co-host. Links in the show notes. Go over and check out their show and leave them a review. Do the follow. Go listen to their episodes in full, the entirety of an episode, which again shows to the apps that it's a good podcast. Because you're going there and you're staying to the end. It's probably one of the best ways you can help a podcaster grow their audience and be shown to more people is by simply going and listening wherever you listen to the very end, like you're doing right now here. This is the perfect way to signal to wherever you're listening on, this is a podcast worth promoting. And all of the apps want you to stay on as long as possible. So go over and listen to our guest co-host episode and leave them some feedback. If they have a buy me a coffee, send them a coffee. If they have a speak pipe, send them a voice message. If they have an email, send them an email. If they're on Instagram, send them a direct message. Do something to support our guest co-hosts. They've given up their time to be here with you, to be here with me, and we can give that back to them with time and attention, our love, our support. Thank you for doing all that for me as well. Here on the How to Podcast series, we'll talk to you soon for our next episode.